Hello, I'm X, and today I'm going to tell you the story of how one man's grand vision for the future of the Arab world ultimately never became a reality. The British Army intelligence officer, archaeologist, diplomat, and writer T. E. Lawrence is widely seen by many historians as one of the most charismatic and dashing figures on the Allied side of the First World War, and is famous for his efforts to help the Arab people succeed in their armed struggle for independence against the Ottoman Empire, hence his romantic nickname, Lawrence of Arabia. But behind the scenes, a few important geopolitical decisions made by the higher-ups of His Majesty's government will soon lead to a series of unfortunate events which will shatter his hope for Arab self-rule and have lasting consequences for the modern history of the Middle East, which still last to this very day. For over 4 centuries, ever since the fall of Constantinople in 1453, the Turkish-ruled Ottoman Empire had long been the dominant power of the region, controlling a vast swathe of territory which included the lands which surround the eastern Mediterranean. But by the beginning of the 20th century, it had lost much of its lands in North Africa, Egypt, and southeastern Europe, hence its derisive Western nickname, the Sick Man of Europe. And although the Turks have been reduced to a shell of their former 17th century glory, they still controlled the Hejaz, where the lands of the two holiest cities of Islam, Mecca and Medina, are located, and the Levant. By 1913, the Ottoman Empire faced 2 wars, one against Italy in its colonial conquest of Libya, and another against Bulgaria in the Balkans, which both ended disastrously for the Turks, and a major political crisis soon saw the Young Turks gaining power and implementing a radical but ruthless process of Turkification of the Ottoman bureaucracy, which alienated many of the empire's increasingly nationalistic minority peoples, such as the Arabs and the Kurds, who were campaigning heavily for greater levels of autonomy and equality within the Ottoman government and military, and thus sought new ways to assert their own independence and self-rule for their own lands. Especially after a bloody, much-publicized 1913 incident in which leading Arab nationalists in Syria were rounded up and executed by the Turkish authorities, and 50,000 Arab civilians, suspected of having nationalist sympathies, were executed in Anatolia, while the Sick Man of Europe was about to form an alliance with Germany, which was challenging the might of Britain and France with its own global imperialist ambitions in order to secure its fragile position within the Middle East. And it is within this context that a certain young Welshman named Thomas Edward Lawrence will soon come into prominence as one of the leading non-Arab figures of the coming Arab War of Independence. Prior to the outbreak of the Great War, Thomas Edward Lawrence had worked as an archaeologist for the British Museum from 1910 to 1914 at Carchemish in what was then Ottoman-controlled Syria, and it was there that he and his team confronted a few Germans who were working on the Baghdad Railway in 1913 and met Gertrude Bell, the adventurous English woman who would immensely influence the British Empire's actions in the region with her travels, writings, and research. And it was also during this time spent working with his Arab colleagues that Lawrence learned Arabic, as well as conflict resolution and leadership skills in the Middle East, and developed a strong sympathy for the Arabs, who had been living under Turkish rule for over 400 years. In January 1914, T.E. Lawrence was part of a British military reconnaissance mission, the true nature of which was disguised as a scientific expedition which explored the northern half of the Sinai Peninsula and the Negev Desert, which was strategically important to the British Empire because an Ottoman army would have to cross it if it were to attack Egypt. Soon after the Ottoman Empire declared war on the Entente on November 11, Lawrence joined the Arab Bureau, an intelligence unit of the British Army, headed by the High Commissioner of Egypt, Sir Henry McMahon, as well as General Gilbert Clayton, that was based in Cairo and was tasked with the disruption of German and Ottoman activities in the Middle East with counter-propaganda. It was there that Lawrence supervised the preparation of maps and daily bulletins for the British generals, scouted out different locations across the area to set up ambushes and attacks against Ottoman positions, and interviewed Ottoman prisoners of war. Within 2 years, Lawrence of Arabia will soon travel around the Middle East on intelligence missions and play an active role in the Arab revolt against Ottoman Turkish rule alongside the nomadic desert-dwelling Bedouin tribes, and he and his fellow British and French officers will provide much crucial military assistance to the Sharif of Mecca, Hussein ibn Ali, and his Arab and Bedouin forces, which were commanded by his sons Ali, Abdullah, Faisal, and Zayd in their numerous battles against the Turks for the duration of the revolt. Beginning from July 14, 1915, the Hashemite Sharif of Mecca and ruler of the Hejaz, Hussein ibn Ali, who is also considered to be the founding father of modern Pan-Arabism, exchanged 5 letters over the course of 2 years with Sir Henry McMahon, in which the Arab ruler, who had a force of 50,000 men under arms, but less than 10,000 of which had rifles, appealed to the British colonial administrator in order to provide him with supplies for the revolt. The High Commissioner of Egypt agreed to his requests, which included the establishment of an independent Kingdom of Arabia that was free from Western interference, and concluded the correspondence in the final letter on March 10, 1916. On June 5 of that year, Ibn Ali's sons, Emirs Abdullah and Faisal, spearheaded the revolt from the deserts of the Hejaz with an assault on the Ottoman-held garrison at Mecca, only for them to be routed back by fierce resistance from Turkish troops led by Fakhri Pasha. 5 days later, Hussein's forces proceeded to lead another assault upon the Holy City, and in a month of bloody street combats, which ensued between the outnumbered but more modern-equipped Turkish soldiers and the Arab tribesmen, Ottoman artillery laid waste to the covering on the Kaaba, and the Sharif used this very incident as religious propaganda to prove that the Turks were desecrating the holiest city of Islam, and to further galvanize support for the revolt from his fellow Arab tribesmen. The Hashemites besieging Mecca would soon be joined by the Egyptian troops, who provided much-needed artillery support, and the holy city was captured on July 9. Meanwhile, Emir Abdullah attacked Taif, which settled down into a siege after an initial repulse, and was captured on September 22 with Egyptian artillery support. Ottoman gunboats patrolling the Red Sea were also swiftly dealt with by French and British naval forces, and on June 10 the port of Jeddah was assailed by 3,500 Arabs with the help of bombardments from British warships and seaplanes, and air support from the seaplane carrier HMS Ben Maishri, and the Ottoman garrison surrendered 6 days later. By the end of September 1916, the Sharifian army had seized the coastal cities of Al-Munfuda, Rabi, Yanbu, and 6,000 Ottoman prisoners with the help of the Royal Navy, and with 1,500 well-armed Ottoman troops still remaining in the Hejaz. The capture of the Red Sea ports also allowed the British to send in a force of 700 Ottoman Arab prisoners of war, who mainly came from what is now Iraq, and went on to join the revolt, along with Muslim troops from French North Africa. It was also on the 10th of June 1916 that the Sharif of Mecca officially proclaimed the start of the Arab revolt, as well as the independence of his kingdom of Hejaz. He raised a unique flag, which was ironically designed by the British George Sykes, to represent the nationalist aspirations of the Arab people. The black bar at the top of the flag represents the opposite caliphate. The green bar in the middle represents Islam, the white bar at the bottom of the flag represents the Umayyad Caliphate, and the red triangle in the middle represents the Hashemite dynasty to which Ibn Ali belonged. This flag, which was once carried high across the billowing desert sands of the Bedouin Arab rebels on their galloping horses or camels, now flies majestically from a tall flagpole which overlooks the site of the Battle of Aqaba on what is now Jordan, and its design has served as the basis for the flags of many modern Arab nations to this day. Along with the British troops which were sent to aid the Bedouin Arab tribesmen, British generals Allenby, Clayton, McMahon, and Newcomb, the Egyptian Expeditionary Force, and the Imperial Camel Corps, as well as the planes and ships of the Royal Navy. There was a French military mission led by Colonel Edward Bremont, which had a significant advantage over the British in having a few Muslim officers in its ranks, with its captain Mohammed Ould Ali Rahou and recent Muslim converts Claude Prost and Laurent Dupuy, with the notable exception of Captain Rosario Pisani, who played a role with the Arab Northern Army as an engineering and artillery officer. In late 1916, the Allies also began the formation of the regular Arab Army, which was recruited from Ottoman Arab prisoners of war and fought in conventional battles along with the irregular tribesmen, and in October of that year, the Arab forces led a direct attack on Medina that was bloodily repulsed by the defenders from the Ottoman garrison. On the 16th of that month, Captain T. E. Lawrence was dispatched by the Arab Bureau to work with the Hashemite forces in the Hejaz. He arrived in Jeddah with Roland Sores, who was Henry McMahon's trusty aide in the fragile negotiations with Ibn Ali. From these talks with the king of the Hejaz, it seemed clear that the revolt had not gone well throughout its first year due to fierce Ottoman resistance and was coming to a standstill. Lawrence therefore suspected that the right leadership was needed in order for the revolt to succeed, and that the rebels should be equipped with more modern British weapons. And then he soon traveled across the Arabian desert on a camel to find the man who would become, in his eyes, the soul of the revolt. Lawrence soon met with the emir's sons Faisal and Abdullah, and after choosing the former over the latter, he convinced him and his brother to coordinate their actions in support of British strategy. Faisal sought to lead the attacks against the Ottomans directly, but was convinced not to do so by Lawrence, who persuaded the Arabs not to chase the Ottomans out of Medina, which could be left there since its Ottoman garrison had become weak by disease and starvation, but to attack the Hejaz Railway, which was seen by the Allies as a strategic tool to deploy Ottoman troops throughout the Middle East on several occasions. This tied up more of them and forced the troops to dedicate many resources to protect the railway and repair the constant damage. During the time he spent in being actively involved with the Arab revolt, Thomas Edward Lawrence had become an ardent supporter for the establishment of independent Arab-ruled states in the Middle East, and he developed a strong admiration for the Arab people and their customs, history, and traditions. And as a skilled tactician, master of guerrilla warfare, and commissaire of Arab culture, Lawrence had this to write about the fighting prowess of the Bedouins. The value of the tribes is defensive only, and their real sphere is guerrilla warfare. They are intelligent and very lively, almost reckless, but too individualistic to endure commands, or fight in line, or to help each other. It would, I think, be impossible to make an organized force out of them. The Hejaz War is one of dervishes against regular forces. We are on the side of the dervishes. Our textbooks do not apply to its conditions at all. In 1917, the Allied forces began to set their sights upon the destruction of the Hejaz Railway, and Lawrence of Arabia launched his first raid on it on March of that year with the help of his Bedouin comrades. Along with his daring attacks which blew up many bridges and other sections of the railway and prevented the Ottomans from fully engaging with the onset of the coming Egyptian Expeditionary Force, Lawrence of Arabia helped Faisal lead the Arabs north from the Hejaz to Syria and teamed up with Bedouin tribesmen led by the revered local guerrilla fighter Auda Abu Tayyib to launch an overland attack to capture the port of Aqaba, the last remaining Ottoman-held stronghold on the Red Sea, which is located in what is now Jordan, and the ensuing battle soon aided the transfer of British supplies to the revolt. From Aqaba, Lawrence proceeded to return to Cairo and met with the newly arrived General Sir Edmund Allenby, with the Egyptian Expeditionary Force, and they both agreed that Faisal's Arab rebels could be very valuable in supporting his campaign in Palestine. In the later months of that year, the Hashemite rebels conducted a few small raids upon Ottoman positions in support of British General Allenby's winter offensive on the Gaza-Beersheba line, which led to the Battle of Beersheba. In September of that year, Lawrence destroyed a Turkish rail convoy by blowing up the bridge it was crossing at Musawara and ambushing its repair crew. In November, he launched a deep raiding party into the Yarmouk River Valley, which ambushed and destroyed the train of an Ottoman general. Allenby's victories will soon lead to the British capture of Jerusalem before Christmas 1917, the first time since the end of the Crusades, when the holy city of Jews, Christians, and Muslims fell under Western European control. From January 25 to 26, 1918, T.E. Lawrence joined Arab regulars led by Jafar Pasha al-Askari in the decisive Battle of Tafila, which led to an offensive rout of the Turkish troops, and for his actions and leadership, he would be awarded the Distinguished Service Order and promoted to lieutenant colonel. Emir Faisal's Arab irregulars helped General Allenby's forces by attacking Turkish lines of communication and sabotaging the railway leading to Palestine, a crucial Turkish supply route, as well as cutting telephone wires, and thus forcing the Turks to send wireless messages that were intercepted by the British. By harassing and pinning down the Ottomans, the Arab irregulars were able to prevent them from concentrating against the advance of General Allenby, and Lawrence was involved in many of these activities and was at the forefront of several key victories. And with the assistance of the Egyptian Expeditionary Force and from British and French officers such as Lawrence, Newcomb, Odili, and Paisani, the Hashemite-led Arab rebels were successfully able to drive the Ottoman Turks out from the desert lands which constitutes what is now the Arabian Peninsula, the Levant, Jordan, and Syria, and raid sections of the Hejaz Railway by blowing up trains and bridges, cutting telegraph wires, and capturing key strategic places. And by October the 1st, 1918, they had captured Damascus, thereby ending more than 400 years of Turkish rule, with Lawrence joining the victorious Arabs as they entered the city alongside Allenby's forces, as they proclaimed the short-lived Arab Kingdom of Syria. And in 1919, a defeated Ottoman officer surrendered Medina, the second holiest city of Islam, back to the Arabs on the orders of the Turkish government, and the Arab revolt finally came to an end. Lawrence then credited the capture of Damascus to Faisal, and once he returned to London, he started the second phase of his tireless campaign for Arab independence. In the final months of the war, Lawrence of Arabia was one of the first few Westerners to hold highly positive views of the Arab people and their culture, sought to convince his superiors within the British government that the independence of the Arabs was in the best of their interests for the post-war future of the Middle East, but his words were met with mixed success. Soon after the armistice of November 1918 brought an end to the Great War, Faisal and T.E. Lawrence both went on to represent the cause of the Arabs at the Paris Peace Conferences, along with Rosario Pisani. However, their goals for Arab independence would never come into fruition, for behind the scenes, the Arabs and the ones who supported them were unaware that the fate of their land was being decided by the soon-to-be victorious Allies in a few ground-shaking wartime agreements to carve up the partitioned Ottoman Empire into British and French spheres of influence that were secretly made without the knowledge of Lawrence and his closest friends. And it is possible that he might not have liked how the ensuing Sykes-Picot Agreement had betrayed the Arabs' noble cause for the establishment of independent, unified Arab states in the Middle East. The British had previously promised the Arab rebels, that is Hussein ibn Ali and his sons, that it would honor their claims to the establishment of a single Arab nation-state which stretched from Aleppo to Aden as per the terms of the Hussein-McMahon Correspondence. But from 1915 to 1916, the British diplomat George Sykes, who also designed the flag of the Arab Revolt, made a secret agreement with French diplomats François Georges Picot on deciding the post-war future of the Arab Peninsula and of the Levant. The ensuing Sykes-Picot agreements partitioned the defeated Ottoman Empire into territories that were under the control of either the British or the French, and the Arabs soon saw this as an act of betrayal. But this was not their only geopolitical concern that they had to face. For in a letter sent by Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour on November 1917 to Lord Rothschild, a prominent member of Britain's Zionist Jewish community, the British government also issued the Balfour Declaration, in which it openly expressed the support of Zionist Jews for a national homeland of the Jewish people in the middle of Palestine. Once information about this and of the Sykes-Picot agreements was leaked, the Arab leaders became even more suspicious of their Western allies, and Hussein ibn Ali, who had previously saved up to 4,000 Armenians during the genocide perpetrated against them by the Turks, viewed himself as the king of the Arabs and ruler of an independent kingdom promised him by the British, which would encompass most of the Arabian Peninsula, refused to sign the Treaty of Versailles since he did not like his lands to be occupied by Western foreigners and for Palestine to be inhabited by Jews coming from Europe. As a result, Ibn Ali refused to sign a subsequent Anglo-Hashemite treaty with the British, who stopped supporting his kingdom of Hejaz in favor of Ibn Saud, who proceeded to invade and annex the Hejaz with his Wahhabi armies of Ikhwan from September 1924 to Christmas Day 1925, and thus bring about the end of the Caliphate of Mecca and Sharifian Caliphate, and lay the foundations of the modern Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The secret Sykes-Picot agreements from 1915 to 1916 was based on the premise that the Triple Entente would emerge victorious over the Ottoman Empire after the war, and formed part of a series of secret agreements which contemplated its partition. Once it came into effect, the agreement divided the Ottoman provinces outside of Arabia into areas of British and French control and influence, and the Palestine region, which was smaller than the later Mandatory Palestine, was to fall under international administration. Britain was given control of the lands, which constitute what is now southern Iraq, Jordan, Palestine, and southern Israel, and a small area which included the portions of Haifa and Accra, in order to give it access to the Mediterranean, while France, which heavily invested much money into the eastern half of the Levant, as well as the land of Mosul due to its oil production facilities, was granted control over the Kurdistan region, southeastern Turkey, Syria, and Lebanon. The Sykes-Picot agreements will later serve as the basis for the 1918 Anglo-French modus vivendi, which provided a framework for the Occupied Enemy Territory Administration in the Levant, and it indirectly led to the partitioning of the Ottoman Empire after 1918. The French thereafter ceded Mosul and the rest of Palestine to the British. Soon after Mandatory Palestine was established in 1920 by the British during their partition of the Ottoman Empire, thousands of Jews from Europe and their families emigrated into the mostly Arab-populated territory, established communal fruit orchards, and caused problems with the Arabs. Tensions soon rose between the two ethnic groups, which sometimes flared into armed clashes and revolts against British rule, which ended only in 1946. And two conflicting nationalist interests will soon arise in Mandatory Palestine between the Jews, many of whom are Zionists who took the words of the Balfour Declaration by heart, and sought to reclaim and resettle what they perceived to be their ancestral homeland of the land of Zion, and the Palestinian Arabs, who had been living there since the days of the Ottoman Empire, and perceived the arrival of the Jewish settlers as a major threat to their own existence and livelihoods. Those problems only became even worse after 1933, when Adolf Hitler sought to rid his country of the Jews once and for all, and even more Jewish immigrant families arrived on the shores of Palestine as a result. This greater influx of Jewish people from Europe into what was previously seen as a largely Arab-populated land led to an already existing ethnic and nationalist tensional war escalating into full-scale armed conflicts waged from either side, such as the 1936-1939 Arab Revolt in Palestine and the 1948 Palestine War, and tensions between Arabs and Jews in the region, which now constitutes the states of Israel and Palestine, have often remained violent and marked by sporadic wars ever since. Lawrence of Arabia's vision of an independent Arabia has still yet to be achieved due to the Sykes-Picot Agreement and the Balfour Declaration causing many long-lasting consequences for the future of the Arab world, including numerous subsequent religious or secular political movements or struggles against Western imperialism and influence, as well as in the wider Islamic world. And it is important for us to learn about this historical fable in order for us to fully understand the geopolitical issues that the Middle East currently faces today. I hope you liked this presentation on a legendary First World War hero and its complex legacy. Be sure to subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like these, and I'll see you soon.